Alright, so first I just want to start out with everybody tonight with thank you for the opportunity to speak before y'all tonight. I really appreciate those of you who showed up. And I'm actually going to go back to the song we just sang, not the last one, the Family of God, but trust and obey.
Yes.
It says, then in fellowship sweet. And it says also, not a burden we bear, not a sorrow we share. I want you to notice that not in one line of this song, but two lines of this song, it references the fact that we are supposed to fellowship. We are supposed to share.
Amen.
We live in a world right now that is more connected than any other time in history. And in all of this connectedness, I have found a word that I love to use when I'm describing it. It is the most connected isolation I have ever seen.
That's right.
We are fully isolated in our connectedness. And the reason I bring that up is because I'm going to be talking tonight about some concepts that are called spiritual disciplines that I've been learning in my class that I'm enrolled in. They're 6-week classes for my Bachelor of Arts in Christian Ministry. The name of this particular class is Personal and Spiritual Development. So this book right here, which I'm actually going to end up purchasing because it is a wonderful book, is called Spiritual Disciplines Handbook, Practices That Transform Us by Dale Calhoun. I'm going to be referencing this book tonight, and I have to mention all this, otherwise I get in trouble for plagiarism. So that's what I'm telling you. And if you have any questions through this, feel free to talk. This is not a sermon. This is a lecture more than anything else. But the reason I bring up the name of it is because I think it's really important that I start with the name, because this has truly been a spiritual and personal journey for myself. We have spent a lot of time looking at ourselves and looking within ourselves to see what we're really made of. Not just the picture that we stand behind, that we show to the world, but the real us behind it. And I had to watch a video last night and journal about my feelings with that video. And the video was talking about how we are designed to be able to fellowship, to share our concerns and our troubles and our flaws and even our sins, you know, with our family, and you know, especially our Christian family. C.S. Lewis depicted a version of hell where people lived in complete isolation. They were secluded on islands, separate from each other by their own choice. And what's really interesting about this, and this is what the gentleman was talking about in the video, is Satan was essentially stripping them of their humanity, because humanity is our race, the human race. And without it being a race, without there being a plurality to it, then you can't call it humanity, and we become isolated, and we fail, and we eventually die. So with all that in mind, I'm going to be discussing this from a very personal perspective. So I'm going to lay bare my own emotions and feelings that I've experienced through this, and I hope to do it in a formational way that is instructional, that everybody else can take a look at the concepts and try to apply them to moments within your own life. Some of the things that I did learn right off the bat about myself is I didn't know myself very well. I had this idea of who I was, and it was a little bit bigger than I really am. In the full scheme of things, I'm really not that important. I am, but I'm not. God can accomplish anything that He has set out or that He wills to be done without me. I am just a part of the picture. I am not the whole. And that's a hard concept to swallow, especially when you were taught, and this is more towards my generation, because the generations before me didn't quite get taught this, but we were taught that we're entitled, that we're all important, and that we're all special, and we all deserve something. But the truth is, we don't deserve anything. We have to earn it. And there's some things that we can earn, and we have to do our best each and every day to seek God's will so that we are as worthy as possible for the mercy and grace that He shows us. So I'm going to talk about 3 disciplines tonight that I just really felt stood out in this course. The assignment that I'm working on tonight only calls for 1, but I just didn't feel like I could get my point across with just one discipline. all three of these disciplines revolve around one thing: listening to God. And these three disciplines are the things that I felt were required to be able to listen to God. You know, we all pray, or at least I hope we all pray in here. But how many of us actually listen to God when He answers back? Because prayer is a communication tool. It's not a one-way complaint line where we get to call God and say, I'm mad at these people and I'm mad at this situation and this is not what you were supposed to do. It is a form of communication. It's a way for us to speak to God and have God speak back to us. So what's the first thing that came up that I really thought was necessary? And that was control of the tongue. Control of the tongue is defined as control of the tongue involves an intentional awareness and governance of words as well as tone of voice in all communication. Now this one right here was a real good one because me and my wife both know how to speak in that tone to make the other one mad. We can say the nicest thing and it still set the other one off. And we both do it intentionally. And we know we do it intentionally. That's what's bad. This brings me to the verse that was included in this, the scripture verse. And y'all, if y'all would like, I'll pause for y'all to find them, but I'm going to read them to you so you don't have to if you don't want to. The first one is James 3, verses 1 through 10. And for those of you who are here this morning for Pastor Chris's sermon, it actually ties into it very well. And this was prepared weeks ago, so it wasn't based off of his. My brethren, let not many of you become teachers, knowing that we shall receive a stricter judgment. For we all stumble in many things. If anyone does not stumble in word, he is a perfect man, able also to bridle the holy body, or the whole body. Indeed, we put bits in horses' mouths, that they may obey us, and we turn their whole body. Look also at ships. Although they are so large and are driven by fierce winds, they are turned by a very small rudder, wherever the pilot desires. Even so, the tongue is a little member and boasts great things. See how great a forest a little fire kindles, and the tongue is a fire. A word of iniquity, the tongue is so set among our members that it defiles the whole body, and sets on fire the course of nature, and it is set on fire by hell. For every kind of beast and bird, of reptile and creature of the sea is tamed, and has been tamed by mankind. But no man can tame the tongue. It is an unruly evil, full of deadly poison. With it we bless our God and Father, and with it we curse men who have been made in the similitude of God. Out of the same mouth proceed blessing and cursing. My brethren, these things ought not to be so. The key point out of that was the tongue. With our tongue, we can build and destroy, and we can bless and curse. I really like the analogy of the ship because, you know, I'm thinking of some huge cruise liner that's 4 or 5 of these churches stacked together and nothing but a rudder maybe the size of the aisle there turns it. I mean, and think about how often your tongue changes everything about what's going on. The way you use it, the tone that you use with it, it all changes it. So how about when we talk to God? What if whenever we go to God in prayer and we take to God the wrong tone, or we go in with pride or, you know, self-fulfilling wishes and we change the tide of what God had planned for us? What if by the very way we talk to God, we take away our own blessings? I believe that control of the tongue is the first step to being able to listen to God. Because if you can't control your tongue, then you're never going to be able to stop complaining long enough to hear God. The second part, naturally, is silence. The definition, as defined by Calvin, is silence is a regenerative practice of attending and listening to God in quiet, without interruption and noise. Silence provides freedom from speaking as well as from listening to words or music, and it also states that reading is a form of listening to words. Although it may not be allowed, you still listen to it within your mind. So the scripture verse for this one was very short, but in Luke chapter 5, verse 16, it says, Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed. If Jesus, the Son of God, who was the only righteous and upright man to walk this earth, withdrew to a lonely place to pray so that he could hear from his Father, don't you think we probably should too?
Right.
Oftentimes, and I know that I was guilty of it myself, I would only pray while I was trying to get dressed in the 5 minutes rushing out of the bedroom, going to work in the morning, or here in the church when everybody else was around and all the noise was going, or in my truck on the way to work. I didn't really set aside a silent time. And as I was going over this, I began to do so. I have an office, so to speak, upstairs in my parents' house. And I have, nobody's up there, there's no sound. I have my prayer board up there now, I have my desk, and I have all my morning activities that center around God up there. So that way it is a conscious effort to remove myself from the world to be within the Spirit of God, to be in that place where it's just me and Him.
Right.
And it makes my wife mad some mornings because I have to get up at 5:30. But since the beginning of me doing this, I have seen prayers answered that I don't think I would have seen otherwise. And the reason for that is because I was able to hear God answer me.
Right.
I was able to listen and understand what God wanted me to do, to be able to follow His will, and to be able to pray and seek the right motives and the right reasons. And I hope to come back, in a couple more months with a stack of cards that I can show to actually demonstrate, look at the prayers God has answered just by me being faithful and asking Him and seeking His will.
Amen.
And the stacks actually get pretty thick already. I mean, it's quite amazing at how wonderful God is to us. And like Aunt Vernell was saying a minute ago, sometimes we forget how important God's love is for us. And, sometimes I think we also forget how important it is that we actually stop and listen to God. Let me see. Now this last part kind of ties in together. I feel like this is the conclusive part of this 3-step methodology. Excuse my tongue tie. Here for this idea, and it is contemplation. The definition of contemplation, as listed here for Calhoun, is contemplation is about waking up. To be contemplative is to experience an event fully in all aspects, practicing the presence of God. So to be contemplative is to actually practice the presence of God. That means to intentionally set aside time to be alone with God. No talking, no music, just to sit there silently and turn your mind off. For those of you who have never tried that, good luck, because it is not easy. To completely rid yourself of any distraction, of any noise, of any thought, to just be one with God in a form of just connectedness is very challenging. It's not something to embark on lightly, because it's not going to be easy and you're going to get discouraged. And I don't say that to dissuade you from attending. I tell you that so that you can be prepared going into it. Because I know that I wasn't, and I got frustrated for the first 3 weeks, because this was actually the very first spiritual discipline I chose a month and a half ago. Because we had a 2-week break, so it was actually longer than that. It was actually almost 2 months ago. I chose this spiritual discipline, and I could not get it. It wasn't until I had the flu and I was laying in my own bed, when so tired of watching Little House on the Prairie that I didn't know what to do with myself anymore. And I just turned everything off and just sat there and I practiced being still with God. And I can tell you that it was, when it finally happened, it was just awesome. It was a way for me to share emotions without having to find the right word or the right attitude or tone to say it, because we're supposed to grow in our prayer life. And this amazed me, because I never realized this before, until we become to a point of constant prayer that does not require any word, thought, or action. We're supposed to be so connected to God through the Holy Spirit that there's a continual stream of just unaltered and unadulterated, I can't talk today, emotions, so that we are so connected that we are literally yoked with Christ, as He says. And I think that it's whenever we get to that point that we truly understand what it's like. That's when we can stand there in the prison, in the dungeon, and our shackles just be released, and we walk out when we're surrounded by, what was it, 16 Roman soldiers. It's whenever you reach those levels that you see miracles like that begin to happen. They already happen around you, but you're not hearing them. You're not seeing them because you're not in tune with God. The scripture that goes along with this discipline was Acts 17:23-28. Therefore, the one whom you worship without knowing, him I proclaim to you. God who made the world and everything in it, since he is Lord of heaven and earth, does not dwell in temples made with hands, nor is he worshipped with men's hands as though he needed anything. Since he gives to all life, breath, and all things, and he has made from one blood every nation of men to dwell on all the face of the earth, and has determined their pre-appointed times and the boundaries of their dwellings, so that they should seek the Lord in the hope that they might grope for him and find him, though he is not far from each one of us. For in him we live and move and have our being, as also some of your own poets have said, for we are also his offspring. Now, looking back at these topics that I've covered here, we see a common theme that I mentioned to you at the beginning, and it was hearing God, experiencing God, and being connected to God. And each one of those, I believe, begins with being able to hear God. And we can't hear God if we're talking. We can't hear God if we're being distracted or if we're running around to and fro. I feel like the deeper I try to get into the ministry, the more busy I get. And, sometimes we have to step back. I don't know how Pastor Chris manages it, because with it being such a small church, I know he has to shoulder a lot of the burden of running it. And I know that I have been struggling with just my job and my studies. I couldn't imagine trying to answer the first call of God to every one of us, which is spread the gospel, and then to turn around and try to be the shepherd of this flock. So for that, I think we should all give him a round of applause. And number two, we all have to remember that sometimes we have to take a step back. Even though we're needed, we have to remember that first and foremost in all things is God. We can't be successful in our marriage, in the running of our families, or in the running of our church until we are first successful in our relationship with God. So all things, and I do mean all things in this world, our jobs, our lives, our children, everything revolve around the fact that we first have to be able to listen to God. There was a few quotes in here, I've got them marked over, that I would really like to share with us that went along with each one of these. The first is from G.K. Chesterton. I guess that's how you say that?
Yes.
Okay. The greatest of all illusions is the illusion of familiarity. All right. And what he meant by that, when I went and looked at it, was he was talking about we are disillusioned that we are truly familiar and close and connected to God, when in truth, 97% of our day, 95%, it's been away from God. It has been away from God, not necessarily in things that are unrighteous, but it's been away from God into things that we want, or that the world has pulled us to, or just even in the daily runaround. The second quote, bear with me, is from Susan Muto. In a noise-polluted world, it is even difficult to hear ourselves think, let alone try to be still and know God. Yet it seems essential for our spiritual life to seek some silence, no matter how busy we may be. Silence is not to be shunned as empty space, but to be befriended as fertile ground for intimacy with God. And as I've been trying to stress through this whole thing, is that each one of these things that I've talked about is a way to grow closer to God, which is our goal as Christians. It is each day to be closer to God than I was yesterday. And last is from Douglas Rumford, and it says, in themselves, spiritual disciplines can do nothing. They can only get us to a place where something can be done. So no matter if you took each of these things I've listed today, and if you truly implemented them into your life, and you talked about them, and you taught them, and you were the best teacher in the world, and all of it was great, it would do nothing if you didn't have the heart behind it. I don't remember the exact saying, but it says, it's part of a song, if I was to get before a crowd and speak with a silver tongue, but I did it without love, it would be nothing. If I could move a mountain, but I did it without love, I would have done nothing. So, the only way that we can get to that place of love, the agape love that we talk about so often in here, is to find that point in our lives and in our spiritual walk with God that we're able to be silent, to control our tongue, and to be contemplative of God, so that we can hear what He has to say for us, so that we can hear what He wants us to do, and so that we can be faithful and do those things. Now, if anybody has any questions, I am through my thing, and I think I covered pretty much 30 minutes, so we should be about good. 10 minutes? It's only been 10. Okay, y'all gotta have 5 minutes worth of questions.
No,
I have a question, I have a comment.
you didn't cover 20.
20 minutes?
That's what I was saying, you got 2 minutes.
Oh, no, it only has to be 15. Okay,
I have a comment.
go ahead.
The song is Proof of Your Love, but I'll have to remember who it's sung by.
Proof of your love.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am, Ms. Campbell.
Well, I like how, God ties in, our everyday lives with scripture, and me controlling my tongue with the situation and not, He gave me that confirmation through the Spirit to control my tongue, and put in my mind that honor thy mother and thy father in that situation, but I wanted to fleshly, let the devil use me and say what I needed to say instead of being still in that moment. So I like what you're saying with the listening of God, control of the tongue, silence and confirmation, and just, being present with God and stuff like that. And it's just confirmation. And I like how it all ties in with our Bible study lessons, with wanting to anger, want God to do wrath on people, but then He didn't want wrath on you. So yeah, I like how everything ties in. And with the being still part, it kind of hit home too, because I was like, sometimes you want to have earmuffs. I'm saying in my situation, you want to have earmuffs to like drown everything out and have that silence, because even with your ears uncovered, you still hear like the cars or the noises, and you just want to have that oneness with God. So yeah, I like that how it ties in with everything. So thank you, Lord.
Yes, sir, Brother Mark.
There's several things. One is that fasting improves your hearing. Usually, my experience is usually the first day doesn't work, but the second and the third day, you fast more than one day, you start hearing better.
Right.
There's two other situations. It's just interesting. Mark actually alluded to one, and that's He will sometimes wake you up in the middle of the night.
Right. Right.
And when sometimes when you wake up in the middle of the night, it wasn't because of bad pizza.
Yeah, it's purpose.
That's right.
Then you have to listen.
Right.
Yes.
Now, there are two circumstances, believe it or not, and this is a little bit, two circumstances often where He will speak to you. One is as you're waking up in the morning. That's a very frequent time when He wakes up, because you're kind of in that process of awakening. He will talk to you.
Right.
And the other thing that's weird is standing in a shower.
Oh, yeah.
And if you ask people, how often people often
It's
speak,
true.
while you're standing in the shower. And I think it's something about, there's a passage in the Psalms that talks about the deep calling to the deep. They're in the roar of the waterfall. As you're standing in the shower, the water's falling over you. That is often the place where He speaks to you. And He speaks to you right here. This is where He speaks. You don't hear it in your ear. You hear it in your
Right.
heart. You hear it in your heart.
Right.
And it's this loud. It's that loud. But you know He's spoken.
Right.
Brother Martin, can I attest to that for a minute? Because I will honestly vouch for my husband that the majority of his alone time is in the bathroom. I tell him all the time, I'm like, who goes in the bathroom for like 42 minutes? Like, I don't get it.
Who times it?
Yes.
42 minutes.
At this point in my life, I do.
But,
Three families in one house, everybody's time.
Get out.
well, it's funny you mentioned the fasting part, because one of the things that we, and this has been, out of all my courses so far, this has been the most eye-opening, because we've had to be real honest. And We don't have to be, because we can lie, but I mean, it'd be kind of bad for a lot of people trying to get Bachelor of Arts in Christian Ministries to be lying, but we've had to open up a lot about things that are going on personally. And one of the latest assignments I was given 2 different lists. One had like 20 questions, one had 12 questions, and they were questions about where are we failing in our Christianity. And one of the things was, do you have control of your bodily appetite? So, you know, it wasn't just talking about food, it was talking about other things as well. But one of my classmates, and I won't say her name, she was talking about that, you know, for her, she feels like that she fails in that area because a lot of times she will just eat for whatever reason, and she doesn't eat things that are necessarily healthy for her. And she was talking about, you know, that when she fasts, she feels closer to God because she doesn't feel like she's being blocked by that habitual sin. And I just thought that was kind of an eye opener, because I didn't, not necessarily the eating part, but I didn't take care of my blood sugars, and I never considered that as a sin against God, even though He clearly tells us to take care of the temple. It just didn't really register for me that was a hindrance or a problem for our communication and our relationship, but it is. And I realized that, and I had he knocked on my door real heavy with a couple of syringes and laser treatments to keep me from going blind. And it was a wake-up call. And I'm gonna give a quick testimony. I started working at American Eye Care in June of last year. I didn't really have any draw towards that job. I was just looking for something that didn't have me working every Saturday, because I wanted to be involved with some of the activities that were going on here. I was never able to go to the donut sales or do any of the other things, and I didn't get off early enough to be able to be part of Vacation Bible School and other things like that. So I think he might have broke out of jail. And I was actually, Kyle came to me and said, hey, would you like to work there? And I was like, yeah, that would be great. And he talked to the owners, and they didn't really answer. But we went to district assembly with Pastor Chris, and it was the first time that we went, and it was there that my call was affirmed to me, that I knew that I was being called into the ministry, and I accepted that call. And the same day that I accepted that call, Miss Sheena Brown, the office manager of American Eye Care, called me and said, the job's yours. I started there. Within a week, I found out I had all this damage to my eyes that would have caused me to be blind within 2 years. Wow. God gave me the treatment I needed, had something that was affordable to me through this opportunity, has taken care of it, and then opened the door for me to move into a job that allows me to be more effective within the ministry, to be able to reach out to people that would not normally be within my grasp. And it's just amazing how whenever you stop and you start listening to things, that the rest of it just kind of clicks in together.
Right. Amen.
Commitment.
Brother Jack calls that providence.
Prophecy.
You know that in James we talk about putting the bit in the horse's mouth,
Mm-hmm.
and you control his whole body.
Mm-hmm.
Then, if you've ever rode a horse that's well trained, it's a pleasure,
Yes.
because you don't have to drag him around.
Yes.
You can just lay the reins on the side of the neck, and he knows exactly what you want him. He'll turn that way or else the other direction. And when you go to stop, you don't have to drag him back to a stop. You just lightly pull the reins and he'll stop. And it's the same way with us serving God. It's so much more pleasure when He doesn't have to drag us around like He did Jonah, and beat it into us that He wants us to do something.
That's a really good analogy. I'm gonna have to make sure you write it down so I can use it.
Because you remember Jonah this morning, he hated Nineveh to start with, and it was the only thing he really wanted to see was their destruction. But God spared them because of their hunger. I don't remember any other place in the Bible where it said that not even the animals were allowed to eat or drink during this fast. But when Jonah went out
that same part where Paul had the conversion, if you think of, kind of like what you were just talking about, where you just, how people say coincidentally, you got the flu and you were in your room and you got tired of watching TV, so you just cut it off. Well, sometimes God puts us in that place
That's right.
to where we will be quiet. He does wake us up at night, but some of us, that's the only time that we can be quiet. And that's the only time he can talk to us. For others, it will be getting a sickness to them. We have a great friend, Lynette Diener married Ron Johnson. Ron Johnson's a pastor out from Kentucky. And he got some kind of disease, intestinal disease. I mean, it was very severe. He lost about 40 pounds, and he wasn't about 140 pounds to start off with. But he liked to die, and they seen him in Jacksonville. During the time he couldn't eat no food at all, was spiritually drawing closer to God than he's ever been in his life. And he had just pastored the church for about 14 years, right? 14 or 16 years. He said he'd never been close to God more than he was when he was hospitalized and near death. God spoke to him then more. So what you're saying tonight, sometimes God brings us into the point where he needs us to be at.
He
I
breaks
just praise
before he
God.
builds.
What's that?
He breaks before he builds.
Yes.
I have kind of something to say. I don't know if you guys want to hear it, but,
Yeah, we also want to hear it.
you know,
But we can't hardly hear you from way over there.
well, I'm not gonna stand up and make you feel weird.
That's
I
good.
was homeless for several years, not just like a couple years or sleeping on couches. I was straight up homeless. And a lot of it was out of disgust because of society and hypocrisy and I thought that I wasn't supposed to be here, you know, and my life was really rough, and I've been having this really rough time. I'm sure you guys already know because I haven't been at church or anything, because I'm kind of like, because I'm doing something that's almost like a habit for me now because of it. But I deprived myself. The first time it happened, it was God deprived me of everything. So I was like, I like what he was talking about with the quiet thing.
Right.
When you're out there and you're seeing people walk by that are talking about God and doing this and that, but they're not living it, and you can see it.
Right,
You know, but they don't know you can see it because they think you're just minuscule. But you're like, I see you, I see you, I see you, I see you. And you can see people. I know it sounds kind of weird, but you can kind of see people radiating things. And like whatever they're about, they wear on their sleeves. They don't believe it, but they are. And that's kind of why I've been like depriving myself. Like I love this place. I love this church. I love all you people. You guys are all good people of God. I know that.
We love you too.
Because I can see it. I mean, I can just flat out see it. But, like, I totally agree with what you're saying, because the quietness, when you're deprived of absolutely nothing, or of everything, and you're just sitting there, and it's not gonna end, you know, until he says it's over.
right.
You really start drawing close to him, and you get to a point where it's like he's your best friend, and it's not like he's like an authoritarian or anything.
Right, right.
Because you know why he's looking out for you. You know why he's telling you what to do.
Right, right.
Because he's your friend. He loves you.
Right.
So I don't know how to explain all this. I don't really know what I'm
Well,
getting
you're
at.